Today is part 2 of a series we began on our last episode, utilizing the Enneagram to understand yourself and others. If you didn't catch part 1, make sure to go back. Otherwise, a lot of what we're sharing today probably won't make a whole lot of sense. If you're in ministry, you're in the people business, whether you're a pastor, a leader, or a volunteer, you need to learn to lead yourself first. It's imperative. As a believer, you have to understand, why do you see the world the way that you do?
Right.
And why others see the world the way they do. And, we're talking about self-awareness.
Right.
We're talking about discernment. And these qualities will make you a better leader. You have to work hard to reveal the blind spots in your own life. We all do. We all have them. We have to learn to see the potential in those people that are around us so that we can uncover and we can develop them to their full potential in Christ and in their calling.
Before we jump into today's episode, will you do us a favor? Maybe there's other pastors, church leaders, volunteers, or just people you know that could benefit from the conversation we're going to have today. Maybe you want to just share today's podcast with them so that they can also glean the benefit of learning how to have those relationships and learning how to be a better leader through the Enneagram.
Welcome to the Small Town Big Church Leadership Podcast, a place for pastors, church leaders, and volunteers to grow themselves and the local church. We're pastors Brad and Misty Hilton, church planters in rural America. Here's a quote from Ian Cron, the author of the book, The Road Back to You. The Enneagram teaches that there are 9 different personality styles in the world, one of which we naturally gravitate toward and adopt in childhood to cope and feel safe. Each type or number has a distinct way of seeing the world and an underlying motivation that powerfully influences how that type thinks, feels, and behaves. All right? So this is a great book.
Yes, it is.
It is so, and the Enneagram in itself is such a deep well of information. There's so much to learn. We have been into it for maybe 3-4 years.
At least.
And we're still learning. There's
absolutely
so much to learn about it.
We talked about in episode 1 how we really enjoyed personality tests and gift testing because we are in the people business, right? As pastors, we're in the people business. But really, everybody's in the people business because we all have relationships with someone, right? That's how God created us. Yeah. And so the Enneagram is incredible because it really helped us to be able to get inside somebody else's head. And I'll just give you a quick illustration. When you and I got married, we saw the world differently. But it did not dawn on me how different we could possibly be because during the time when we were courting or dating, engaged, it was I guess maybe you probably saw those things, but you didn't really think that maybe those things would be a problem later. As soon as you recognize or they tell you what number they are, you immediately know okay, I know how you see the world. If you've studied it. And so The Road Back to You was an incredible read. And they have a study guide as well, Ian Cron does. And he now has a podcast. I love all of it. A few years ago, we gifted that book, The Road Back to You, to all of our leaders.
Which we do every Christmas. We will give books to our top leaders. And
absolutely.
Invest
Which is
in
a
them.
great way to invest in your leadership. Yeah. It really has tremendously helped us in our marriage, our parenting. Oh my gosh, the way that we parented really tremendously helped us in our leadership, and just in the way that we relate to people in our congregation and the people that we have relationships with. So today we are going to look a little more in depth at the first 3 numbers. So 1, 2, and 3.
All right, let's start with type number 1, the perfectionist, or what we like to call the improver. It's a person who is typically very ethical, dedicated, reliable. They're motivated by a desire to live the right way, whatever seems right, at least in their own eyes, to improve the world or others around them. They like to avoid fault and blame.
They don't want to make a mistake.
Making mistakes. They hate it. It bothers them very deeply.
Yes.
Because they want to be perceived they want to perceive themselves.
Right.
And they want others to perceive them as being perfect. We say that in quotes, but
Right.
but really that's what it is. That's why we call them the perfectionists. And we use that term loosely, but it really is the truth. And so let's take just a moment and let's look at some of the strengths, because this is what's really most important.
So these guys are like natural born leaders. Okay, they're wise and discerning. They're rational and reasonable. They're very self-disciplined, which is what I love
Yeah,
about
that's what I love
ones,
about
right?
ones.
They desire justice. They have this strong sense of responsibility, all right? So these are kind of people that you want in roles in your organizations where you need to minimize mistakes, okay? So I think about it, and in our organization, we have ones that are a part of our staff and some of our volunteers. And I think about the people that you want in those roles are in roles like finance, right? Imagine if you have someone in finance who doesn't mind making a mistake and they're okay with like not just getting everything to zero out and balance out, right? That would be a problem.
You want a perfectionist in this role.
You do. Because they have this perfectionist nature, what they expect from others is sometimes just not realistic.
Not realistic,
because
yeah.
they're not a one. They don't
Right.
see the world the same way.
Right.
And when others around them on their team don't meet up to their expectations of perfection, that type 1 person can also struggle with resentment or anger towards other people. And also, they feel a sense that they need to stay in control. Like, they struggle with the feeling of like expressing how they really feel to other people. And so a lot of times like that anger and that resentment kind of builds.
Yeah.
And they can put on a front because, again, remember, they want to be perceived as perfect. So the way that you handle yourself, it wouldn't be, some people would just blow their top,
Yeah.
and yet that wouldn't be considered the right way to handle a situation. So sometimes, the weakness or the pitfall can be
The one
holding
will internalize it.
and internalizing, and it becomes resentment and frustration. And so,
criticism
yes.
and judgment. All right, let's look at type 2, the helper. I love 2s.
Yes.
They're warm, they're caring, they're giving people. They're motivated by a need to be loved and feel needed and do it, and they avoid acknowledging their own needs. They pride themselves in servanthood, and they're warm-hearted.
Yeah.
Sincerity makes them very, very friendly and empathetic towards other people. They have a lot of strengths. A few of my favorite people, one being my mom,
Right.
and my daughter Blake.
Yes.
They are both just love them to pieces, and they are so incredibly helpful. They're always there to say, what can I do? They're always there to serve and just come alongside of us, and they are so helpful in so many ways. They have
Yes.
servant hearts, tender hearts. They're just very empathetic, very loving, very compassionate, and they always
Yeah.
want to find the need and fill it. And so they're wonderful, wonderful to have in your life.
Absolutely. But with any number, as we said, there are the strengths, and you've kind of covered those, but there's also pitfalls,
Sure.
right? And so some of those pitfalls, and we've having them in our family, but also having them that work for us. And I'll be honest, like, you want some 2s in your organization. You need them.
Yeah, you have to have
You
them.
have to
You
have them. Because these people are the ones who are...
You won't be able to get everything done.
They're the first ones to be like, hey, what else can I do? Is there anything I can take off of your plate?
Yeah.
For our daughter Blake, growing up in a household where there aren't any other 2s, okay, she was the easiest one that you could get to just say, hey, would you help me?
Yeah.
And the answer is like
Absolutely.
almost
Yeah.
90% of the time,
Yeah.
even as a kid,
Yeah.
was yes.
Yeah.
She probably got less spankings than
I was going to
anybody
say,
else.
I can't really remember. I'm sure
There
there was
was.
times, but
Absolutely, there
not
was.
very many. A lot of times you could just look at her,
Yeah,
and she
she'd
would just
cry.
start crying. It's
Right.
like, okay, well, I guess that did it.
But at the same time, there are pitfalls, okay? And so here's just some of the pitfalls. Because they have such the desire to help, they also tend to focus on others more than on their self. And because of this, 2s tend to expect others to invest in them like at the same level, right? Because I helped you in the past, then I expect you to return
Everybody
the favor.
should be helpful
right?
like this.
But not everybody has that to way of seeing the world.
Right.
So this group of people can also kind of assume the martyr in the relationship, and they can
You're taking
at
advantage of me.
times
Yeah.
manipulate situations as well for their own. And while they're focused on needing the approval of others, they also have a really hard time receiving constructive criticism from others because they just want to be so helpful that it's hard for them to take that. So this group of people are like, they are probably the easiest ones to even burn out, okay? Because they want to be so helpful. When you are asking something of them, they want to be a people pleaser. Mm-hmm. So they are like, yes, I'll do that. Yes, I'll do that. Yes, I'll do that. And then later they look back and they're wondering, why did I say yes? Mm-hmm. It wasn't like they were 1,000% sure they should, or they felt called of God to do it. They just said yes. And then later they will become frustrated.
They had some yes regret.
That they said yes.
Yeah.
A 2 is really, they're amazing to have in your life, but as a leader, you also need to understand they desperately need that approval, okay? And I know that's kind of, if you're a 2, you're like, no, I don't. Yes, you do.
That appreciation.
Yes.
Man, you're so, and
that's
you're not being, don't be fake about it. No, what we're saying is
be sincere.
Genuinely appreciative.
Because
and
some
value
people,
them. They need it.
Some numbers, although every human needs affirmation
Everybody
to
does.
some degree.
Yeah.
Some personality types need it way more than others.
2s really need it.
And 2s do. And if you want a 2 to be your best right-hand person, you need to tell them
to be
verbally.
Loyal and love you forever.
But you need to verbalize how much you appreciate them.
And maybe it's really difficult for you to pay a compliment. You know, I've had people in my family and you know, growing up that they're just not good at it. Yeah. But what I'm telling you as a leader, you need to get good at it.
Yes.
You need to push yourself to say, you know what, you're doing a really good job.
So let's look at type 3.
Type 3 is the achiever. Some call it the performer.
Right.
Type. These people are success oriented. I love the 3. Image conscious. Don't forget that. That's an important one. Mm-hmm. Wired for productivity. They're motivated by a need to be or appear to be successful and to avoid failure. While they can be authentic role models when they're at their best, they tend to struggle with being a workaholic and being over competitive. Ouch, right? Okay, this hits a little close to home.
It does.
And we're going to talk about somebody that I know that is a 3 here in a moment. This girl right here. Let's talk about some strengths. All right, let's talk about strengths. You know, as a 3, you're driven, you're an inspiring leader, healthy. You're really good at developing yourself and making contributions, you know, to the world around you, and enjoy motivating others to be better, to achieve great things themselves, and so the words that come to mind are authentic, competent, adaptable.
Yeah.
These are all great strengths. And so let's just talk about this. What is it like living life through the lens of a 3? And then, of course, I'll add some commentary.
Sure. So, as I said earlier, you don't realize growing up that you see the world differently than other people. Mm-hmm. So, I remember growing up, even as a kid, and was I competitive? Yes. You know, as I went through high school, I mean, I was that student who I had to succeed. And so I had to have a 4.0. I just remember as I got older, I always wanted to understand, why does it bother me so bad and other people, it didn't, right? It was really difficult when you and I got married. We are so very different.
Completely different.
And
in a lot of ways, but in some ways we are.
Yeah, very compatible, but very different in the way we saw the world. You had a drive for success, but different than I did. Yeah. And so, you know, with a 3, there's so many positive attributes. At the same time, there are those pitfalls.
Yeah. And let me just say real quick,
Okay.
we encourage you to read the book by Ian Kahn,
Absolutely.
The Road Back to You, because this is such a deep well. There is so much to it.
Oh, yeah.
Like
We're
I said,
barely touching the surface,
and,
guys.
and there's so much that we don't know about it.
Yeah, we're still learning.
And there's a lot of different ways that the numbers relate to other types as well. And,
Yes.
and the reason I'm saying this is because when the 9 is operating at its healthiest,
Right.
there's actually a lot of 3 qualities, tendencies
Yeah.
that come to the surface.
It's frustrating when you begin to study yourself to realize, like, I don't want to be that unhealthy version. And some of those things are fear of failure. Like, it's unacceptable
Right.
to fail, which failure is a part of life,
Yeah.
right? But it's so hard for a 3.
Really beat yourself up.
If you're not careful, you can have a tendency to be jealous towards others who achieve more, okay?
Because you're competitive.
Yes, because you're very
Yeah.
competitive. So it's hard for you to celebrate others' successes because underlying, you're like, without even sometimes realizing it, you tend to not be able to celebrate because you have this
You want
bit of
others
jealousy.
to perceive you that way.
Right.
Right.
Also, you have problems when you're not in a healthy place of being vulnerable. You don't want anyone to perceive you as weak. And so opening up and like sharing with someone else your personal struggles or your
struggle to be
downfalls.
transparent.
Yes. You really have a very difficult time. And so it's hard to let people get close to you.
Yeah.
So growing up, I never really had any real close friends. And I never realized that's probably why.
Yeah. Well,
because you don't want to let people get that close to you
Yeah.
and see who you really are and be vulnerable with them.
Once you and I kind of started building our relationship, you had mentioned to me that prior to me arriving to college, a lot of people's first impression of you at school was, man, she's
Cocky.
She's cocky. She's snobby.
Yeah.
She is,
And that's also a pitfall.
Very standoffish.
Right.
You know.
Once people got to know me, they realized
That's not the
like
truth
that
at all.
wasn't the truth
Yeah.
at all. It was because I was terrified, to be honest, to even get outside of my box and talk to other people. So I would just make a beeline for where I was going, but I didn't do it like with my head down and my shoulders
You did it with
shrugged.
confidence.
I did it with confidence. Like I'll walk into a room and
Yeah.
I'll own it. And so when I heard that, that was part of the self-awareness then
Yeah.
of like, oh my gosh, I don't want anybody to perceive me
Right.
as being a snob. Now, cocky, maybe on the sports side of it. Like
Yeah,
maybe,
yeah.
confident
You
is
are
what I
kind-
wanted
you
to
are
be.
kinda cocky.
Okay? But I'm just saying that for all of us in the types, and we're wrapping this up today, as you begin to identify what type you are, you need to appreciate the God-given personality that He created you with. Because I'm telling you right now, in an organization like a church or any other business, God created you as an individual with that personality for a specific purpose. And in an organization, you need every one of those types.
Yes, you do.
Okay? So like even in our organization,
Yeah, I'm glad you brought this up.
we have multiple 3s, all right? And they are driven. Achievement,
They're
goal-oriented,
wonderful.
right? And their spouses are all a different number.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's a beautiful mix when you bring everybody together. But here's what I want you to understand is if you don't understand why you see the world the way you do,
Right.
and why somebody else sees it differently, you can have a lot of drama in organizations or a lot of frustration and a lot of personality conflict, if you will. And you need all of those numbers. You need every type of personality, but it's so important that you help everyone get to a place where
They're operating healthy.
yes, the healthiest version of yourself. And people used to just talk about it's about maturity, and it is, okay? But you can help people get there faster by understanding their personalities. And so I would highly encourage you, get the road back to you.
Yeah.
Start listening to the podcast, start
Oh, yeah.
understanding personalities. And I'll be honest, at this point in our ministry, when we hire, we know
We take
what
them-
number we're looking
their
for.
type, their number into high
Yes,
consideration.
parents, moms and dads.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, young parents, learn this
Know
stuff
the numbers.
now
Know the
so that
numbers.
you can raise your kids accordingly
It helped
because
us
God created them
tremendously.
the way that they are. And next time we'll talk about the next 3. But some of the numbers are harder to raise than others. Okay, as I said that earlier. And you will have some collisions with kids. And sometimes you just think your kids are being so difficult. Man, God created them with that personality. It's our goal as parents. It's our God-given responsibility to mold and shape them into who God created them to be. And so the faster you can understand their personality and help them be the healthiest version of themselves, that is so fulfilling. And so we hope you've enjoyed today's podcast. I encourage you again, get the road back to you. Start doing some deep dive into the Enneagram. We'll catch you next time for the next 3 numbers.